Welcome today. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be discussing cold chain sustainability, improvements for reducing food waste, and lowering our carbon emissions. My name is Brian Kelly. I am Director of Sales at Danfoss Industrial Refrigeration for US and Canada. I'm joined by my friends and colleagues today. Here with me is Aer Teale.
I'm the Director of Engineering at Lineage Logistics for energy efficiency.
Great, thank you for joining. And Hernan?
Thanks. My name is Hernan Hidalgo, Director of Business Development for Industrial Refrigeration North America. Glad to be here.
Great, thank you for joining. So last week we attended Atmosphere America, and there was a lot of great topics and discussions about our energy efficiency and refrigerants such as CO2 and ammonia refrigeration. So today what we wanted to do was kind of discuss some of the hot topics that we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. One would be the trends in our industry, how that's impacting us and also as customers. Second would be some of the technologies. What can we do as solution provider from Danfoss, as well as what Lineage is doing from their side to implement these new technologies, right? How can we help reduce food waste, and what can we do to get the food faster to the customers, lowering carbon emissions, and obviously how we use our natural refrigerants. So one of the things we were talking about too is like, what can we do as well from the people process side? How are we going to help implement? Because we can have the greatest technologies, but then at the end of the day, we definitely have to have the process in place and the correct people, right, to impact in a positive way, right? So one of the things that I wanted to ask, where I wanted to start, was with you, Aer, is from your side, what are some of the trends that you are seeing that's impacting, maybe how Lineage is going to market now?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of different things like the impacts of e-commerce, the impacts of, different large customers choosing not to do distribution themselves and choosing not to do long-term storage themselves. And so we're picking up, both of those spaces as well. And even we're getting involved in the e-commerce space as well. Okay,
now from the e-commerce, like when you say that for the audience, what are you referring then from the e-commerce? Like maybe I guess start back in the pandemic, like what did you see change?
Sure, prior to the pandemic, it was identified that about 1 million square feet of retail space needed to be converted to cold storage, industrial cold storage space to accommodate the growth of like perishable good e-commerce. So Amazon Prime perishable, stuff like that, right? Whole Foods, right? And then when the pandemic hit and people were being conscious about not going to the grocery stores and using grocery services, or couldn't go to the grocery stores and had to use grocery delivery services, that need for perishable good e-commerce skyrocketed. And the effect of that is still being felt in our business and in the marketplace. We're still responding to that and adapting to it as well.
Now, when we talk about that, like that would be like what we're seeing with the urbanization, right? So on the urbanization, then how did that change? Like going, we're trying to get that food obviously closer, right, to where the requirement is. So what were some of the things that you guys saw that?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing a lot of last mile service type opportunities, where in the past the last mile has proved very difficult for perishable goods. How do we get it from where the order is picked to the front door efficiently and cost effectively? And there are really good delivery services out there that already exist, like FedEx, UPS, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is some of the e-commerce companies coming in and renting a smaller part from us of our existing facilities and using that as their pick order area and then shipping it out via UPS or FedEx rather than have their own fleet.
I wanted to, like, we were all discussing during our travels when you brought up a good point. Like we were laughing. You know, you grew up outside
Oh,
of Minneapolis, so like, how does that impacting, right? Because in the past, the cold storage facilities, right, would be, you know, hours outside of you know, the major urban areas, but yet with this change in e-commerce, because the population isn't. So to meet this growing demand, food growing demand, population is getting older, right? So what did you guys see there then?
Yeah, and also, like, you have all this flexibility now. You have these dynamic changes, right? And then how do you actually, I guess it's a challenge for you to cope with all these changes. How do you go with smaller, let's say, renters of the space, if you like, and all the dynamic of temperatures that you may have in terms of products and so forth. So it's interesting to see how you see the coping with those challenges as well.
Yeah, a lot of the e-commerce business we're seeing that we're leasing out a smaller space of our facility is more on the frozen side.
Okay.
So, you know, it's like a frozen specialty meat or something like that. We're not doing a lot of true grocery service. You know, the large grocers have figured out their system, like the Walmart, the Amazon, or Whole Foods, excuse me. Some of those others have figured that out, and you know, and they're utilizing like Instacart or DoorDash type things as well. You know, how our buildings will evolve in response to some of the e-commerce is a little yet to be seen, but potentially what could happen as we see urban densification happen, because you know, part of sustainable development is having to stop that urban sprawl from spreading, right?
Right.
And so some of the densification that could occur, you know, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you know, will we be building smaller footprint facilities to accommodate localized distribution, right?
Right, and then from a technology, then that'll change, like from the technology side of like, you know, you're going to a different form fit of the facility, you know, because now you're closer to the people. So from a natural refrigerant, I mean, you have choices and everything, but that kind of ties into then what can we do or what can be done to ensure that we have like a reliable cold chain, like unbroken, you know, cold chain to get it from, you know, farm to plate, so to speak. So from your side, from the Lineage side, then you think you're going to have these DCs like closer than to the population, and
potentially, definitely along like major highways and major thoroughfares. We're seeing an increase in rail as well because of the efficiency of rail. One of the reasons why we acquired Trans. And, you know, we're trying to utilize more efficient distribution methods, working with our customers to optimize their distribution and supply chain. So it's not just the cold storage facilities themselves, but we're using technology to enable us to really transform the supply chain.
right, and that's funny because then you kind of stole my thunder on the next, because then I was like, you know, wanted to go over some of the new technologies, right, that we could do to reduce food waste. So Danfoss from our side, from solution provider, but also what are some of the things maybe Lineage has developed, right, where obviously you're trying to use the technologies that are there, but like when we think of like demand response and things like that. So I'd be interested to see like what are you doing, because you have the logistics side to deal with, right? So as a way to reduce the carbon and you know, emissions and so what were some of those things?
And as you can see, you know, because you have the logistics part, then you have these other players that are coming, the smaller guys, and you have a lot of integration, a lot of, let's say, information, you know, your cold storage, your, you know, temperatures, but also how much do they have control over and how you need to integrate that data into your pool so you can make the right decisions, how you prepare your cold storages to receive that kind of food in those places.
we're not at that level yet of like, hey, we need to do this to the refrigeration system because we have this big load coming in. But on our inbound side, you know, we've developed our own technology called LinLink to manage the inbound trucks coming in and products. We're in the process of deploying and implementing our own warehouse management system to bring, you know, all these different warehouse management systems into one Lineage system. And then from like on the demand response side, as being a responsible partner and user of electricity on our grid, you know, if we can help the grid when there is high demand and respond to it appropriately, then, you know, there's potential where if enough of those industrial users don't actually or get off the grid during those high demand times, maybe peaking plants don't have to come online, and that's a big carbon footprint, those peaking plants when they come online. However, so that's the environmental side of the demand response, and then there's the people side of current state of demand response where our operators and technicians, because it's not a very automated process currently, you know, they miss their family's soccer games and baseball and picnics or whatever because they have to stay late and manage the demand response event and get the system, pull the system off the grid or curtail the load to the levels that we'd agreed upon and then bring it back up after the event. So that's the social aspect. And then like the economic aspect of demand response is, you know, we get paid by the utilities for participating in these demand response events, and it's a direct bottom line contribution. So if we can automate this process, we can impact all three pillars of sustainability.
So it's a win-win, right? Obviously, to implement this technology, and that's what Aer, I want you to inform Aer, like what we're doing on the food retail side, on the monitoring, and how we're seeing that demand obviously go into the industrial side for like obviously cases like that. But if we want to
because
touch
it's
on that.
you know, it's obviously interesting. And one thing that I wanted to highlight, I mean, you touch upon people, and that was, you know, it's great. I mean, we talk about energy, but that the sustainability in those three pillars, the social responsibility as well. So it was a great point. And then, you know, to help, you know, on that end, and maybe to manage those events and how you can actually do more socially responsible. Of course, you have the economic portion of it. You still have to do it. On the food retail, for instance, we do have technology, I'll call it AllSense, that actually allows the supermarket industry to not only monitor obviously temperatures and controls, but also look at, you know, how this equipment it's running, how maybe if there is failures, maybe if there is something that you could see that is could impact, you know, the loading of the cases, for instance. That could be a substantial help for the retail. Now, when you look at the industrial side, you can actually model the exact same solutions to accomplish similar results or even better results. But like you said, maybe there is no, we still have to work maybe on the connection that that could be probably a teamwork with the Lineage or the end users, because now you have to connect the dots. No, we have a very good model working on, let's say, on the food retail, and maybe we have some good models on the industrial side, but how we connect that world and that collaboration, as we do a lot more, I wouldn't say automation, because automation is just doing the same thing a little bit better, but, you know, rather having a very good, you know, set of algorithms that allows you to be more productive, more socially responsible, and have your energy goals.
Right.
And part of that too is what we've seen is obviously through the pandemic, right? When you had people that were sick, couldn't get on the site, So that's where the monitoring really definitely took hold, where you saw that demand where, you didn't have access. And where I know on your side, you've inherited a lot of different older facilities, and so I know that's a challenge as well. But that's one thing for us with the AIM Controls group that we brought on, was a way to take that industrial refrigeration expertise and then apply solutions for, because every site's different, so there's different challenges, of course, but yeah, from our side, that was something that we've seen a really increase, requests, like, help us with that, and so it's exciting because, like you said, the technology's there, but also from your side, when you guys were looking at that, like, you're looking at these facilities, and there's the energy side, but really, if we get into it, you touched on it, like, we're talking people on process, right? So you can have the greatest technology, but then, I guess, from your side, now you have the people side, right? So if you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious, how do we strengthen those competencies that we can obviously repeat, is sustainable, and it's not just like, what did we hear last week about, there was a great analogy about the snowflake, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't want a custom one time and that's it. We want to be able to...
It's the sustainability culture.
Right.
Maintain and sustain, right?
Maintain, sustain. So I'd be curious, like, what you're having to tackle on that side, on the people and the process.
Yeah, so I lead a small team currently of about 3 individuals, including myself, and I have an incredible intern working with me this summer. And, our team operates on 4 pillars: coach, teach, collaborate, and identify opportunities. Nowhere in those 4 pillars that we operate on, core 4 principles, are we saying, hey, we need to go do energy efficiency projects. We're doing energy conservation. In the teach, collaborate, and coach, we're really trying to change the culture of how people view energy. A lot of general managers in the facility level have been so focused in on energy cost that we need to control that, but they don't understand that they don't have control over the weather. I mean, no one does.
Right.
We wouldn't be talking about climate change if we had control of the weather, right? They don't have control over how much product is coming in, and if the customer is not sending it quite at what they said they were going to send it in at, so warm inbound product.
And at the temperature that they said it.
Yeah. They don't have control over how the building envelope was constructed, so to speak. Most of the time, they're not involved in the construction process, or it's an old facility and older facility, existing facility, and they've just inherited what they've inherited.
And we've always done it this way.
Exactly. So what they do have control over, though, is when they use equipment, the demand side, and their system operating set points, and the ability to turn off equipment. So our job, my team's job, is really to go in there and help them understand what they have. Understand the why behind what they're doing, and then move them along into the how, so that they can create their own pathway to energy efficiency and energy conservation, where we're not just going in there and putting lipstick on a pig with some new technology that they don't have the competency to operate and maintain.
So obviously you're trying to also reduce the complexity, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's, again, sustainable.
It's sustainable.
Yeah, they have to do the jobs, but it has to be in a way that they can really implement
exactly
the few changes that make a lot of impact.
Exactly.
So part of that education process, right, is also you have to promote new ideas and that culture, right? But it goes back to the why. Why are we doing what we're doing, right?
Yep.
So yeah, in all that, so you're saying then on the back end, by changing that culture,
Yep.
educating,
Yep.
you'll then, the positive impact is you'll naturally reduce your
Yep.
energy consumption, right? Because
Yep.
your team is educating, assessing the facility.
Yep.
And then based on that, then you're determining then, okay, what technology can we implement then, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, we're looking at, once we have the culture established, and we might even be able to establish it in one day while we're there, of like, you can see the lights click with people when you're starting to ask them like, well, tell me about your box temperature. Why are you operating at -5? Well, that's what the general manager wants us to run at. Okay. Well, what's your, and kind of bring them through some of the thinking and get them to make some of these ideas themselves and the connections. So, and bring them along that journey. And then once that connection is made, it's like, okay, we're gonna watch how you operate the system, because all of our facilities, most of our facilities, I should say, in North America, have real-time energy, electricity monitoring meters with high accuracy. So it's a little big brother-ish, but we can go back and help monitor. And when we see something that seems weird, we can ping them and be like, hey, what happened? What's going on? And bring them through the thinking process of looking at the information and trying to understand it. And so when we're there, we'll identify potential opportunities. And then as we coach them along, we can say, okay, we can now replace this compressor with a more efficient type of compressor, because we know now that they understand the why, so they're just not going to walk in and turn on their favorite compressor every day.
Right. So part of your challenge though is assessing the people, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Yeah, and you have a lot of facilities to do that for.
A lot of facilities and a lot of varying backgrounds too. Some people were forklift mechanics and moved into the refrigeration because an opening was opened up. The difficult thing with the skilled trades, including operators, technicians, mechanics, plumbers, welders, all this, right? We have more people leaving through retirement than coming in. And so we have this huge skill gap. And so when you look at the social pillar of sustainability, training your employees, and the economic benefit that comes from, moving from maybe a warehouse worker that has the attitude and the aptitude of, hey, they like to tinker with cars or something like that. They like to know how to fix things. Moving someone along their own journey into a more advanced position is kind of the approach we're taking. But it's a lot to come around to have like a common training. And what we're seeing out in the industry, especially on the end users, I'm heavily involved with RETA and contractors, we're seeing it too. Everybody is asking for trained technicians and operators. Okay, so there's, RETA has the credentialing systems that are backed by ANSI that can say, hey, these people know what they're doing. They're safe. They can safely operate in a industrial refrigeration machinery room, and it also kind of creates that pathway of like along the way of the journey. How do we bring new people into our industry to backfill these positions? That's an interesting problem. I think I'm the younger millennial generation, so I grew up, I still know how to use a rotary phone.
Yeah. Right.
And my first cell phone was in college, and I miss my BlackBerry. Like who doesn't miss their BlackBerry? I mean, come on, it was the best thing ever. And it's not necessarily money that motivates my generation or the generations that are after me. It's, I grew up watching Captain Planet. That was my superhero. That was my Spider-Man, right, of the day. You know, and so we've heard about climate change. We've heard about sustainability and all these other important and relevant topics.
Right.
And so how do we get people excited about that piece to get them brought in? Because that's what our industry is.
Right.
It's all about sustainability. I mean, think about it. What can you
Yeah.
buy? Can you eat a ham at Christmas?
Yes.
Well, how many hams are on a pig? 2, right? So, do you think we harvest all those hams at one time? No, we harvest them throughout the year and go through a freezing process and everything and preserve that food so when it's needed, it's available. That is sustainability, using the entire pig when in grilling season, we just want the pork chops and ribs, right?
Right,
And maybe the butts for pulled pork, but yeah.
No, and I mean, it's exciting with all the different technologies, right, to help us promote sustainable cold chain. But one of the things that are exciting is that there are so many new technologies, right? So like we've discussed over the last, week, that obviously the fun part for us is every day's different, every project's different, every site is different. So, to really attract young engineers that, it's sustainable, but it's food, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we need refrigeration, we need food, right? And we can make a positive impact, right? To reduce food, reduce our carbon footprint. And the exciting part is like, I can say I work for a global, company that is invested heavily in how do we be, like you said, socially responsible. And that's the exciting part to attract talent.
The innovation that we have put, I mean, I can see also on your end, I mean, you have great things that you do on the innovation side. On our side, we do innovation on the mechanical, on the electronics, and how we actually connect our equipment, but also not to just connect them internally on our side, but also how we can connect to your needs. And that's what makes it interesting also for the newer generations. It's not just the old valve that they needed to have some oil and grease just to put them on, but rather it's something that is more exciting, that is more connected, and they can identify and relate to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that even is just, you're hitting upon like facility modernization. Like I have to figure out, and I have to work with new technologies and different technologies, and how do I plug them into existing buildings when, I love the analogy of all of our buildings, our existing platform are USB-A connections, right? And the new cords that are coming out and new technologies have a USB-C connection.
Or a lighting connection.
Right, exactly. So now I have to create the dongle, that facility modernization piece.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That fits into the sustainability piece. Because, think about the embedded carbon in an existing building. The concrete, the walls, the piping, the wiring, the insulation, the glass. Like there's so much embedded carbon, and to ensure that embedded carbon stays there, we have to preserve the buildings. So facility modernization is a key part of sustainability, so that we can use new technologies in them to make them last another 30, 40, 50 years.
No, exactly. And then like before we go into the Q&A from the audience, just a short summary, because obviously there's so much new technology coming into our industry. We were joking over the last week, traveling, talking about even packaging, right?
Yeah.
Like how the buyer looks at packaging, right? Because it's like, I want to buy, we laughed, organic food, right?
Yeah.
Organic.
But it's wrapped in plastic with styrofoam.
Yeah.
So, it kind of defeats, what I mean? So there's a lot of change that, we can help promote, and we can do that, right? We're at Atmosphere America, we have RETA, we have IAR, so, we have to, do our part on our end, right? To attract, young talent to our
It's a journey. Industry. I think it's a journey, and then we are part of the people who can facilitate and hopefully inspire other people to join us in that journey.
Exactly, and I think that's a key thing too. Is we belong to the industrial refrigeration community. which is RETA, which is IAR, which is, ASHRAE, and even organizations like Atmosphere who are trying to promote natural refrigerants and other things like that. We need to embrace the communities we belong into and make sure we're being good contributors to them and growing the capacity of the people within them, so that these organizations do live on. RETA's over 110 years old, for example.
Yep.
And I mean, IAR was formed in the late 70s. So these organizations have been around a long time and have supported our organizations. ASHRAE is another really old one. So how are we as companies, how are we as individuals
Contributing.
exactly?
Yeah, and obviously with the market trends, I mean, we have to move, we have to be flexible, right? To be able to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about those smaller farm companies, like to get these exotic, now people, I want bison, I want, so there's so many things that are changing, from how we shop and how we consume. So there's a great opportunities for us for that. And with the technologies, right, for the demand response, like obviously, how do we get that data, right? So that's where we have to use, solution providers like Danfoss and learn what are your requirements, and then how can we help get that information so you can obviously respond in a, immediate, response.
It gets you the information in a way that you can actually read it and start understanding it and processing it, because what do you do with that information? That's the next step.
Yeah, a big challenge for any organization is how do we send the data out without bad things coming back in,
Right.
the cybersecurity piece of it. So that's part of, the social pillar of sustainability as well, data protection. So there's a lot of work that is occurring on that, a lot of different ways to do it, but that's probably the biggest challenge first that you have to solve as an organization is how do I send a signal out or receive a signal in, ensure it's safe, and data in and out to ensure it's safe.
And you brought up safe, so you said something great last week. It was my favorite, your line with your mentor talking.
Oh, yeah.
So about people and process, but can you touch on the whole, first is it?
Yeah, so I was taught by one of my mentors, he had so many axioms and like when I first started, he would come down on Fridays and be like, all right, what'd you learn this week, and give me a test. Like, kind of brutal. I think he was joking, but not entirely sure. But his axiom is safe and reliable, then you get to do energy efficiency.
Okay.
If it's not safe, that's our number one priority, keeping our team members and our communities safe. And it's not reliable, if a compressor's constantly going on and off, or we're making fan motors fail, or the wiring in the existing facility is 40 years old, 30 years old, we have to make sure those things are good before we even start thinking about the culture piece, which is the next piece that's really important of, do we have the culture? And then we can move into away from just doing energy conservation activities, which is changing people's behaviors and attitudes, into the fun stuff, right? The energy efficiency.
The confidence.
Yeah.
And that will help get you to doing more with less, right? But you have to start, like you said, I love that, is it safe, is it reliable? And you get caught up on all this, like you said, the fun technologies, and you got an older facility, you throw a VFD on there, but then is the wiring, set up to
handle
to handle it, so that, even though the intent is there, right? You have to, like you said, is it reliable, is it safe? So I love that. We did have some questions from the audience. So one of the questions, it was interesting, came to the panel, obviously, a lot of interesting topics and to be discussed, right? But one of the questions was, how do we make these sustainable solutions adaptable and easily integrated? And they took our line, not a snowflake or a one-off project. So for the panel, how do we make these sustainable solutions adaptable and easily integrated? So it was to the panel. We can.
Oof. That's
It's
tough.
Very.
Um,
I think
Yeah.
if I may just say something, for you to follow something and also believe in it, it has to be well communicated and I would say to some extent fairly simple too.
yeah.
If it's too complex,
Yeah.
then we don't follow things, right? So, and technology will help us there, but also it's just probably the way that we communicate that and we start, getting that message conveyed in an easy way.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is even like you're hitting on it is just the language we're using. How are we communicating this technology change? Are we making the right analogies and connecting the dots to people to their level of understanding, right? And great example is for years, or when I first heard transcritical CO2 systems, I'm like, okay, I don't really quite understand the process. I went to the Danfoss mobile unit training when it was down in Dallas, Texas area at Lincoln Tech, and I finally made the connection that this flash tank was a CPR.
Yeah.
It's a controlled pressure receiver. It's just a gas pump system. And once I understood that, I was able to it was such a barrier for me to move into the understanding that it was like, oh, now I'm starting to see the connections. Oh, this is just a two-stage system with a CPR. I get it now, right?
It wasn't so intimidating.
It wasn't so intimidating. And so, even we've been talking this last week about the number of compressors in a transcritical rack needs to come down to make it adoption into the industrial market. And, we've been talking and even just questioning that statement. Why don't we just start calling these compressor racks a compressor package? And people are like, oh, okay, cool, whatever.
And it's not,
Yeah.
It's just one, oh, we have 4 compressor packages? That's okay.
not the
that's
number barrier there.
Yeah, it's not a number barrier then, right? And so, because they get fixated on, and even myself, oh, this system has 90 compressors. How are we going to maintain all these and do all these PMs and do, you just snowball and you can't move fast.
Right. No, and I think part of the message for that sustainability though is also the solutions, but the passion. We have the passion, but it's I think if we maintain that passion with that message, and we're seeing results, and that's the great thing. So what I liked last week at Atmosphere America is people were sharing application successes as a way to help educate, okay, this is what we can do with natural refrigerants as a way to deliver, sustainability, energy savings. So I like that. Now I have a question. This is fun. The panel, but it's not for the panel. It's actually directed for Aer. So the question is ESG. What is Lineage doing?
Oh, sure. So we are currently in forming our ESG strategy. We have a great team that's working together. It's cross collaborative among many different departments, and it's a journey, and it will make us a better ran organization. We'll be able to really report out also as well as how we're impacting each pillar and how we're achieving sustainability that creates long-term shareholder value. So it's not just, hey, we're saving the planet. We are, being a responsible citizen in our communities, and we are ensuring that we are around for a long time and going to be making an economic development possible.
Okay, no, that's cool. And I think I'll be able to have a link to what Danfoss is doing from our side for the ESG, so just to share.
Yeah, because I think, for instance, just to that point on ESG, so You were talking last week about, some of the, you call it 3 steps or
Scope 3.
scope 3, yeah.
Yeah.
So on the scope 3, that's when we also come in, and we will help you with our ESG strategies to get there, because at the end of the day you will need those partners to achieve your goals.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Good
you're
point.
part of our scope 3 emissions, we're part of someone else's scope 3 emissions. You're part of many people's scope 3 emissions, and as well as us. So yeah, we all kind of affect each other, which is really interesting when you start thinking about the interconnection that then it does create. And if you think about like organizations as a person, which right now we see that interconnectedness of organizations through a lot of this, which is really cool.
And the need of the collaboration. To get there.
But again, back to the original question about trends and bringing younger people, engineers into our industry is also the relationships, and that's what's great. Right? Our industry is a big industry, but small. It's definitely a family industry, which is exciting, right?
Yeah, it is exciting.
So we had one question, last one, a question for the panel. So what was interesting ties into kind of the ESG. So the question is like, obviously, the first word, these are very interesting topics, but the question is, who should be the stakeholders that need to be involved when you're having these sustainability discussions?
Yeah, it's employees, your team members, it's the executives, it's your customers. They all have and your shareholders. They all have a stake in this organization, and you need to understand what they're asking for and needing from us.
Yeah, and understanding the requirements, but it goes back, I think it was you or maybe Hernan about the collaboration side, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're all in it together, it's our planet. You know what I mean? So we have to do...
Yeah, I think that this is one interesting one, because if I talk to my kids about, environment, and I don't think I had the same conversations, 10 years or 15 years ago. So there is a lot more visibility. And of course there is a visibility at the corporate level and so forth, but I think, as we move along and people take more conscience of that, then we start also making our commitments, right? Whether you are in one part of the social environment or another, if we all move in that direction, then we can get those goals much better realized. And then of course at the levels that we are, people has to be from accounting to anything else.
Yep.
Very good. No, well, thank you both. That was it on the questions. So really at this time, for more information, feel free to check out the links in the related content box on 24 platform. And with that, I think we'll ready to wrap it up. But I wanted to thank Aer and Hernan for joining, and everyone else that's joined. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're happy to support. We want to grow together and partner with excellent organizations like Lineage, and we're happy to support your journey, but also everybody else's journey, right, for this green transition, right? So please feel free to get in touch with further questions, and also thank you, and stay tuned for. We're going to have additional RETHINK Live sessions happening throughout the day, and thank you everyone for attending, and look forward to partnering. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.